record as well. So,
okay, we're recording.
Great. So I want to get started because I know that time is, valuable to everyone. So the way I want to do this was I wanted to cover some really important things. This specific PDF that we're referencing at LA Film School on campus and online, and kind of go over that stuff first, and then kind of open it to conversations and things like that about, well, anything, questions, sharing of experiences, I think is important. But just in case someone's here to kind of check in and kind of hear the important info, I want to kind of get to that from the beginning. So I'm going to try to share my screen here real quick, see if I'll be able to. All right, share. Hi everyone, by the way, and welcome. I am John Artigo, the program director for digital filmmaking, and obviously have a lot of the faculty have joined as well, which I appreciate. I don't know, are you guys able to see what I'm sharing? I think it said I'm not allowed to. Okay, it said host disabled. So somebody disabled.
Sorry, I gave you permission now. You should be good now.
I don't like you having this kind of control, Jenna. It's very, very dangerous. Okay, so, all right. So this is can we all see this? Yeah, I'll see it. Okay. Basically, what happened was horrible, and it's things like that similar have happened in the past. And every time anything like that ever happens, it's absolutely horrible. The first time I heard about this was some movie I watched as a kid, like in the 80s. And the actor was joking around with a gun with blanks, and he put it to his head and pulled the trigger, and he died. And I remember hearing that the guy who was the star of that show died that way. And I thought as a kid, like 8 years old or something, it was just like frightening to think that that could happen. And of course, there are so many movies all the time where there are no issues whatsoever. But when something like this happens, it's all over the news, so everybody's aware of it and talking about it. It's so sad and so devastating to not just the film community, but the world. Somebody who's out there just trying to do their creative work, unsuspecting, and then that's the end. Is very, very sad. So I appreciate. I know that some students had reached out and asked about, hey, are we going to get together and talk about something? I definitely appreciate those students who stepped forward and said, hey, can we have this conversation? It was absolutely on my mind as well. But a lot of times, it is really nice when the students come forward and say, hey, can we talk about this? Because it is a huge reason why we're together, today having this conversation, which I think is important for so many people. And unfortunately, there's not enough. We want more people to be here, but we'll keep trying to spread the word and get people to attend these things. So this is what they're sharing with people on campus and here. And I think there's a lot of details, but here's the most important thing, is that people understand that using guns with blanks, that what it says there, blanks can kill people. There's that feeling that they can't. It's a blank. It's like, no, it still absolutely can. This part about treat all firearms as though they are loaded. Live ammunition is never to be used nor brought onto any studio lot or stage. And I think, like, certainly in our LA Film School world as students, we don't need to be bringing anything like that onto our sets. I just think it's not there's too many things that could go wrong. And oftentimes, what we see with student productions is you're not able to get the personnel that you want to support the production. Sometimes you don't have the money to support all the safety and things that you would want to bring on for things like this. So the safest thing to do is just to certainly never have any real weapons of any kind on set, including, swords, knives, things that are sharp, obviously explosives. you know, firearms, things like that. It's the safest way to make sure that you're doing your part to keep everybody who's on the movie production and in the vicinity safe. I'm actually going to, I want to put this up in the chat so you guys also are able to download this and share this. So stand by on that really quick. Just want to throw it up there. Let's see, where is chat? There it is. Okay. All right, I'm just going to throw it. That's not it. There it is. Did not attach. It keeps like, I keep dropping it in there and it shows the plus sign and I let go of it and it doesn't go in. Why is that happening? Okay, you guys can see that when I write test, right?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. I'm gonna see if somebody else can drop this into the chat. Does anybody else have this on my team?
If you send it to me, I can try it out, John.
Okay, I'm gonna put it onto the backlot of the Discord channel. Let's see if it'll go there. Okay, it uploaded there. So you should be able to download it from there and try to do it. For some reason, it wasn't letting me do it. So these are obviously recommendations. The other thing that I'm telling you that, you know, if, again, there's nothing that we require students to do in terms of like, you must have weapons in your stories. You know, if it's ever even discussed, it's usually because it's coming from a story that you want to tell that involves them in some capacity. We definitely want you guys to be able to, you know, experiment with the types of movies that you want to make, but you are not required to make films that have weapons, fake weapons, props that are dangerous in any capacity. But sometimes they come up in scripts. And so I just think you should know that if you are going to write stories with these things, then you need to be aware of how much, you know, responsibility you have from a safety perspective and how much more work there probably is involved in terms of contacting local police and permitting and film commissions and things like that. I think that the best recommendation of all in terms of like storytelling, especially at LA Film School as students going through this program, is to just never have real weapons on set and to always contact the right people in the area you're going to be shooting in terms of the police and the film commission. And as long as you do those things, you might run into certain situations where you're not able to do what you want to do. In other situations, you might be able to get that support where you're able to film what you want to film. So just make sure you kind of keep those at the forefront of what you're thinking. And sorry about that. Apparently we have dogs. I didn't know that. But anyway, just make sure that that is always at the forefront. And if this is in the chat now, were you able to get it in there?
We couldn't get it in the chat, but Jenna's going to upload it to Google Drive and share a link.
Okay.
So it can be downloaded.
There it is. Awesome. Okay, perfect. So I think you guys should download this. You should have it. You should keep it with you. And, you know, just there's no amount of time that is too little time in preparing for a shoot when you were going to have people on set that are going to be looking to you as the director, producer, whatever. Oftentimes you guys are wearing many, many hats. I just want to instill that it is a responsibility that you have as a filmmaker, even when you're a student, that you are bringing people together for a reason, that you do have a role in making sure that everything's done in the right way and that people are safe about it. So I wanted to see if anybody else had anybody on my team had anything to add, anybody else had anything to add just about this conversation. And then certainly after that, we'll also have an opportunity to share stories where we have run into situations. I know I have some, I have a couple in my experience that I want to share, but I'll do it after just to see if there's any other important information that we need to kind of discuss or questions that people have. So I'm just going to open it up for anyone. Anyone?
If I may.
Yeah.
Everybody, I'm Taylor Carley, film student. I'm also currently in the military doing security and law enforcement for the Navy. I know one thing that I haven't seen on sets, at least from behind the scenes, or have heard any discussion of it, and just from briefly scrolling through the safety bulletin, I haven't seen anything of it either. One important device that you can absolutely utilize and should utilize for any kind of weapons, regardless of if it's live ammunition or blanks, is what's called a clearing barrel. Basically, it's something that you put your weapon into to make sure that everything's safe and clear when you're loading and unloading, to ensure that if anything, God forbid, happens of an accidental discharge, it has a place to go instead of it going into someone or into someone's property or animal, pet, whatever. It's a safety device essentially. But there's also a two-person integrity to be used with that. There is what we call a clearing barrel supervisor, where they're sitting there and they literally have the steps of what you should do to load and unload a weapon posted in front of the clearing barrel. And they're like, all right, on this command, you do this. On this command, you do this. And you don't do those commands. You don't do that process until you're told do that process. I think that's something that should be utilized in the industry, because even the police, the local police, federal police, they all have this thing. Not everybody even uses it, and that's one problem that is a big thing outside of the military that I've seen. And so it should be added into the process for the safety.
Yeah, they most certainly should be looking at, and obviously will be in because of this scenario, I'm sure. And maybe, people like Gerald, who have, who are in like the Directors Guild and things like that, maybe you guys have received additional information about things that may be happening or coming out, but I would assume they're going to be looking closely at this and making some changes.
Gerald, I was wondering if you could talk to the students about what they might look for in an armorer when they get onto a professional set eventually. Like, what's a quality in someone that they should be paying attention to or not?
Well, when we work on, what we call bigger budget productions, there usually typically is an armorer. And of course, there's always a property master or a prop master. The prop master usually hires the armorer. The armorer typically is certified and has at least a minimum amount of experience on set, working with weapons and working with talent. The armorer is the one solely responsible for the weapons, the handling of it, the cleaning of it, the usage of it, the acquiring it, and of course, the safety and security of it. So on a set, the armorer is the one who only touches it in accordance with the talent who's using it.
Mm-hmm.
In a normal scenario, unlike the one that happened on that shoot, the armorer and the talent are the only two people. I'm assuming there's only one person using a weapon. If there's obviously multiple talent using weapons, then they would be included in that group. But nobody from the cast or crew, other than those designated, should be touching those weapons. And that's where this failed miserably. Even as a DGA first AD, as myself is, I still have never touched one of those weapons. I do not want to touch it, and I should not touch it, because once somebody else touches it, you lose that safety and security of the weapon if it is what they call, hot or cold for the set. So if you bring more people into the mix, the confusion is going to increase, just like anything else. As they say, too many cooks in the kitchen. So the armorer is the one who is responsible for it. And typically, in productions, when obviously they must be cutting costs here, because the armorer was actually the prop master too, which in most productions is a big red flag.
Wow.
Because the safety of the cast and crew and vendors and locations and everything else that deals with the production is by far the most important thing on set. So the armorer is the one who should touch it and only touch it and check those repeatedly throughout the day. Anytime the armorer does not have it in their possession, in their hand, not anywhere else on set, unless it's locked up securely. That is the rules. And that should be adhered to in any production, whether your budget is 0 or 200 million. And if they followed those rules, then this would never have happened. And I've been on thousands of shoots and never once has this happened, because you have to follow the rules. And of course, you know, there are tragedies, and this is extremely tragic. And I know somebody, a friend of mine, who actually knows her, Halyna. So yeah, it hits home for us, and they are going to be doing something about it. I've talked to the DGA. I've talked to other unions within the film industry, and they are also going to do something about it. And there are going to be much stiffer penalties coming very soon. They're waiting to find out what's going to happen with this particular scenario, and then they're going to modify what they want to do.
Right.
It doesn't matter, and let me give you an example. It does not matter if it is a real weapon, a prop weapon, or something that looks similar to a weapon. It is all considered the same, a weapon, just to let you know. And it doesn't matter what your budget is. It doesn't matter where you bought it, because once it appears to be a weapon, you do not understand the impact it has on the people around you. They do not know what it is. They're going to assume what they think it is, and therefore you might get the worst case feedback or outcome from that. And to give you an example, I was on a commercial, and I was the first AD, and the producer decided that they wanted to do a kidnapping scene in the middle of Brooklyn at night. And they did notify the police. They did notify the film office. And the good thing is there was fake rubber knives and rubber guns kidnapping this gentleman, throwing him in the back of a cargo van with very minimal lighting. There was no lighting. There was just a cameraman out there to try and make it look as real and as frenetic as possible. And if we did not contact those two agencies and tell them what was going on, there was 50 calls in less than 6 minutes after the scene started. And other police showed up and had their weapons drawn. So the police at the scene, thank God, talked to them and diffused that situation rather quickly. If we did not contact them, it would have been much, much worse. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that also, you know, risk management is an important thing as a filmmaker to consider when you're going to go out and shoot on a set or on location. Where it says safety meeting in this document, that is very important. It's not just about guns, it's about all of the other stuff. And sometimes it's not just about the props. It's about where are you shooting? Are you shooting near a cliff? Are you shooting near a busy street? Is there, you know, there just could be certain things. Are you shooting in a place where there's a lot of grass, where there's commonly snakes in that area? I mean, it's like you have to think about what can go wrong. And this safety meeting should happen on every set, every time you have a meeting. And it was something I learned on a feature film when I was thinking about the things people were holding and interacting with. I wasn't thinking about, we had real hot weapons in a horror movie that we made hanging on the wall in like the killer's lair. Okay. and there was like a pickaxe and things on the wall. So to me, I didn't even think about it, but I was like, there was a time when the camera crew was coming through the door, and there was a makeup artist who was kind of there. And as they were coming through, she kind of backed up to get out of the way, and it hit her in the back of the head, a pickaxe, the sharp end. Now it was very like nothing, it just hit her head, but it wasn't like she was like bleeding and stuff, but still it was a whole thing where our insurance was involved. I was glad I got an LLC for that movie, and that it was the movie that is responsible and not me personally. But I learned, oh, we should have had a meeting and brought everybody in and said, hey, everybody, just so you know, see up here on the wall, these are sharp weapons. You know, you go and you tell people what's going on so people are aware, so people can be more careful. And so that safety meeting, even when you think like you don't have any of the obvious things that you have to meet about, you still have to do risk management. Look at where you're shooting. Is there a problem here? Is there an issue that we need to talk about as a group and bring everybody together? So remember that safety meeting. Always do it every day of a production, not just once, but every day, or every time you change to a new location. You got to do that.
And it's usually done by the first AD.
Yeah.
Because they know the schedule.
You have a couple questions, Tyson
Yeah.
and Taylor are waiting.
Yeah, so for me, growing up with gun safety, family, military family, growing up with family that had guns, used guns, I was taught that the safety training comes first. And so for me going forward, if there ever is prop or real guns on set, I would want to see maybe having everyone on set have that gun safety training taken before they're even on set, just so everyone on set knows, has that training.
Right. I mean, if you think about what Gerald said, I think it's good for people to be in the know and to understand what's going on and to have that training. But I do think it's really important that nobody is in the position to handle that stuff, So, I mean, certainly the more educated people are, the better. But I just would never want it to come off like, oh, well, you can kind of have them there as long as everybody's trained. And I know that's not what you were saying. I'm just saying that I just want to be extra careful,
Yes.
That when we're talking about this stuff, there are so many levels to, what the process should be. And it's like, you can't cut corners. What you're talking about is kind of going above and beyond, which I think is always the best case scenario, like go above and beyond. But yeah, I mean, the more training and the more knowledge that there is, I think the better. And, even as an actor, there's the whole actor side to this, right? Do you just believe what you're told? And in most cases, actors probably do. I think most of the time they're like, oh, they just do. And I think there should be a different process in there where the actor is like, hold on, before we get to this point, I need to know X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Yes, that is true. If the actors or talent is handling a gun on set, it is required that they go through gun training.
Awesome.
From the stunt coordinator.
Okay.
We'll actually require that.
Okay.
And that, once again, it's all about safety. So,
and if you're working with SAG requires that there be a stunt coordinator if there's a gun. So it's a circular, like it's a like a ring of responsibility. Yeah.
Taylor, do you have a question?
I just wanted to add to the conversation, especially since something that Gerald said that stood out to me. Even when they notified the local law enforcement, you still had law enforcement showing up, guns drawn. So it's super vital and important to over communicate. You want to make sure that everybody has probably heard it 1,000 times before and still have people on set ready to respond to the people that are responding in order to make sure that there's no issues involved, because that is something that is a very, very dangerous situation when you have local law enforcement. Even though they were told, they still showed up with their weapons drawn because not everybody in that department was communicated to.
Can I make a point that's related to this? I think that a lot of times when we talk about guns on set, we're like, to me, they've become cliche. Like when we use a gun in a movie, it's a cliche for something. And like, if you can think about a better tool to use or a better example of like violence or power or whatever it is that you're trying to get across in that moment, it's safer, but also like it usually makes the movie better. Like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is about them not having access to a gun. So the majority of the movie is leading up to this point where they're trying to get their hands on something that we've seen 1,000 times in other like American movies. It just almost has lost all effect. So on top of this whole safety conversation, there's another part of it too, to me at least, which is that the movies aren't as good. It's not as interesting when you have guns in them usually.
Yeah, it is creatively, generally, it's an easy choice. You know,
Right.
you just decide to put a gun in there or something. And so, yeah, I mean, without question, I think I encourage people to come up with really good, compelling stories that don't require that. It's not to say that, you know, sometimes, you know, are movies with guns a part of our cinema like landscape? Like, absolutely, it is. You know, that is a big part of it. But especially being in school, I think it's like what's most important is, you know, somebody might think that they really need a real gun because they want that to look real. And they need a gun that's going to go off and look like it actually is, you know, exploding around in there. And, you know, my pushback on that would be, trust me that there's so many aspects of filmmaking that are hard to execute on at a high level. Acting, you know, relationship, you know, how the story is progressing, how it ties in, how well the story is written. Those are hard things to execute on. So you might be thinking about, I need to have this gun for this scene to make it really work. But truthfully, it really is about all the other things and the production design and the details and the sound and all this kind of stuff that's really going to make it work. So I do a lot of judging of films and competitions. And I just got done doing one that ended right before Halloween. And there were some great scenes where people had some really cool looking, you know, gun things in their movies. But that was the best part of their movie. The rest of it didn't work. There wasn't a good flow to it. It was like it was all built around just being able to do that. And so I think we definitely encourage our students to find ways to be creative in your storytelling and develop as a filmmaker and do all these other things. When you leave here and you go out and you are working more in the professional world and with other professionals, then things can be done at the right level with the right amount of attention and care and safety and all of those things. So, I mean, I definitely strongly encourage all students to avoid those as much as possible and focus on story elements, challenge yourself to do something a little different. And like Charles said, just by doing that, you're still growing and developing as a filmmaker, but you're also doing it without that safety issue hanging over your head or that concern or worry. Shauna, I know you had some experiences that you wanted to share. If you could do that, that'd be great.
Thanks. So I was in the military as well. I was in the Army. We also had clearing barrels, but we also had 2 to 3 supervisors that would check our weapons every time, and they would also clear the same weapon several times. We were taught muzzle awareness, so don't point at anything that you don't want to shoot. this summer, I actually worked with Mark Steves Grove from Rocky Mountain Stunts. He did a really good job. Before each scene that either had explosives or a weapon, he would hold a quick safety brief and said, there is a weapon on the scene. Please be aware, watch what you're doing, you know, and stuff like that. So one of the things that we also had in basic training with our blanks was called a blank firing adapter. It's like a little square that goes inside a weapon, and it stops the bullet from coming out, even though most blanks have gunpowder, but some also have wood tips in them. So putting this blank fire adapter in there stops whatever else comes through, but you still get the flames and stuff like that. And if, you know, we decide to use a real weapon, which after the situation, probably not. If we use the blank firing adapter and put, you know, the green paint for special effects, we can always paint it green and then edit it out later. If you want to use a real weapon with real blanks, it's an option. Another idea I had was, if you want the look, the sound in the video of someone pulling a trigger, so like a really close up, I suggest that you use a GoPro or a preset camera. So that way no one is near the weapon when it goes off. And you can also shoot it into a clearing barrel. Does anybody have anything off of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that, and again, I'll let, I always want to say the same thing to what anybody says about different options, because there are different options. And to me, I'm still thinking of this as on like a professional movie set. I'm still believing that, you know, for us, I think that, you know, we would want to avoid those as much as possible. And again, only because I say, I've seen people do amazing things with effects that are added in after the fact in terms of gunfire and whatnot. And I know that it does not quite look the same. When the storytelling is good and the execution is good, then that looks as real as it ever can, because it sounds right, it looks right, and you're thinking more about what's happening in the story and less about that specific moment when the gun goes off. So I just always want to keep reiterating that best to avoid anything that is explosive or loadable. And obviously, when it says live ammunition is never to be used on a set or brought on a set, I definitely recommend that nobody ever bring live ammunition on. And so you should just take everything that you're hearing, because I think it's good conversations, and it's important to look at, like, okay, what could you do like in the future, or what could they do in the movie industry, which I think is an important conversation as well. I think erring on the side of safety is always best. And so just as the program director of the digital filmmaking program, I'm always going to suggest that you guys try to avoid those things as much as possible and just focus on your storytelling and working on that stuff. Taylor, were you going to say something to what Shauna brought up?
I was going to say that the idea of having that adapter on the end to stop anything from actually exiting the barrel would be a great idea, especially with green, since you can key that out in post. And that's basically really all I had for it. But I also agree with you too, in that a lot of people are getting lost in to use a weird term I've been hearing a lot lately, lost in the sauce in regards to, they want to add all these weapons and cool special effects and everything to their film, but they don't focus on the story first. And I think that we should be promoting story first over visual effects in order to help, like, especially give a talk about that, because we're having a talk, all this I'm sure all the other colleges are having a talk, but what about the independent filmmakers out there that haven't been to school and that don't have this kind of avenue to have this discussion? That's something we should probably look into as an industry, of saying, hey, let's have this big open discussion for everybody, not just the schools and the industry professionals that are currently working.
Yeah.
They're doing that on all the news stations, so they are bringing it to everybody's attention. That's the best you can do there. But like you said earlier, John, you know, weapons in a film is not a necessity. It's actually a luxury. It can enhance the story, but without the story, it really doesn't do anything. So there are so many other alternatives to shooting a film without using weapons, but actually having a weapon appear to be in the film. And yeah, you know, After Effects and sound effects can all do the same thing. Camera angles, lighting, it all helps it. I don't know how many films I've done where, you know, we didn't even have access to weapons in the beginning when I was starting, and we made do, you know, and you would have thought there was a gun in the scene, but guess what? There never was. So as filmmakers in the Los Angeles Film Program, you should think about that before trying to get the weapon. It will also save you a lot of money. And like John said, it will save you a lot of grief because there's so many other things that go along with it. If you don't have that weapon on set, you can concentrate on more important things like storytelling.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Ace here in a second because he has his hand up, but it's the same thing where people do movies with like too many special effects in them. It's like things that are distracting from the story, and sometimes they're put in there to overcompensate for a lack of story. And I think it's the same for guns too, because I think it's an easy choice often. I'm going to do this and it's going to make my film be more serious. Just like a very common topic for young filmmakers is films about suicide, because it makes you feel right away like, oh, well, if I have this person struggling with this is, and then they kill themselves at the end, it's going to be like, that's going to be really dramatic. And it's true, it's tragic, but stories are like are designed and built and composed, and there's so many more levels to it than just like the one big like, ooh, a gun or special effects or suicide or death, murder, like all of these things. Like those are all things you can add that can help a story, but they shouldn't be the catalyst for making a story. And oftentimes that is the mistake. Ace.
Hi guys. So I'm actually from the animation program, but I actually had my start in filmmaking. So that's what I did my first schooling. I recall like a lot of times we focus absolutely heavily on paperwork. So like no matter what we did, even if it was a small meeting, you know, just a small little interview, we had to do serious paperwork for it. So it was just like we hated that. So I just think back going to that moment right now, and then like this situation, and you know, none of it should have happened in itself, because you know, you think there's so many processes you got to go through before you even get to that moment, before you just have someone firing a weapon. But you know, I think that's needs to be talked about in the industry for one, because I feel like nowadays, you know, you have those hungry people who are like, even like someone said earlier, I think when you're like ready to just do independent filmmaking and you don't have that type of training, so you're just ready to go, but you don't really know what you're doing. So that really like is a big thing to talk about in the industry, or just people in general who want to start filmmaking, knowing the proper protocols to go through before you just end up, you know, going a super action scene where it's heavy fire, and next thing you know, someone's getting hurt. So
Yeah, and think about, you know, I'm a father, and you know, if I didn't know the film industry and my daughter came to me and was like, oh, these people are making this movie and they asked me to be in it, I might not know enough to know like there's certain questions I need to ask before I let her go and do that, you know. But I know that there's a lot of things that can go wrong on movie sets. I would know the questions to ask, but most people don't know the questions to ask. And grassroots filmmaking used to be in like the 90s and the early 2000s. It was something that was really, you know, celebrated, and like, hey, yeah, you know, you go out and you do it on your own. And then it was like stuff started happening, and it was like, oh, but you can go out and do it on your own, but it's very dangerous to do it that way. There's too many things from a liability perspective that can go wrong. So grassroots is always going to be a part of, you know, filmmaking, guerrilla filmmaking, as they call it. But I think that, yeah, we need to have this conversation. This conversation needs to spread out to other people, and even the people who are like really just trying to like break into the industry from underground. You know, there's so much to consider, and that's why the conversation does have to keep going, and it has to keep getting spread out and had with many other people.
I think like all of the instructors can testify that like film sets are inherently dangerous even without guns. Like just the lights that we use, the places that we have to shoot, going from a night shoot to a day shoot, like just the demands on your body are ridiculous. You don't need to add like an exponential harm to the set by bringing in a firearm while everyone is not at their like best physical present, you know, shape anyway. Like it's just adding chaos to a situation that's already one of the more dangerous jobs that you could. I guess we have some Army people and Navy people here who would disagree with my assessment that it's one of the more dangerous jobs you could have. But in terms of not war situations, it's one of the more dangerous jobs you could have in a everyday life. I think Shauna wants to say something too.
All right, I have two things. The first one, do you guys think, the instructors, do you guys think there would be an extra class or at least a week's worth of training for more safety? So that way the online students have more, and students in general, have more safety instructions if they do decide to become an independent filmmaker?
It's a good question. You know, I think that one thing that I want to do is I want to consider where in our courses are we really talking about safety, and where are we sort of, especially in our production courses, I just think we have to go look at everything and go, is there little bits of information we need to add in here? I know that it's touched on. In terms of an entire course dedicated to safety, I could definitely see the value in something like that. I just have to look at the program as a whole and see, but I think like, you know, it's something that we need to discuss like as a team, and especially on an admin level in terms of the course chart and you know what students go through. It might be better, instead of having a class that's dedicated to it, having it be so we have some classes that are kind of broken up by week in the term, right? There's 4 weeks in a term. I think that there's one particular class where early in the program, we need to probably dedicate a week to specifically talking about safety and the things that we need to do, because we can't ever have anything happen to anyone anywhere, but specifically in this organization. Like we have to make sure that we're you know, working with you guys and giving you the information, and that it's not forgotten. So I think we're going to get together for sure as a team and discuss those kinds of things. So I do appreciate you bringing that up, you know, specifically, but we will talk about that.
I feel like, especially since I'm getting to the point where in my degree where I'm approaching that capstone here pretty quick. I was actually sitting like, oh crap, this is like right around the corner for me here soon. There's been a couple of talks in some of the classes about safety, but I feel like it's not enough. Especially since when doing the online courses, I personally, I've been filming and had a camera in my hand since I was a kid. And I feel like the 4 weeks we have for each individual class already isn't enough. I feel like when it comes to safety, we're going to want to put more than just a week in there for one class. I'd find a way to squeeze it in between. That way we can get more talk about it, even if we have to add it a couple times or a couple days worth of talk in each class that we have, instead of doing it for 1 week in one class, to get it spread out further across. That way it's constantly in people's mind every class, instead of it just being something that is talked about only 1 week and that's it.
Off the top of my head, I'm thinking 1 week at the start of the program, and then before any production class, before there's going to be any sort of, you know, like when you're getting ready to go into directing too, before you get there, having another, you know, like revisiting safety and reiterating like how we approach those things. And then again, when we do, capstone. So like it would happen potentially 3 times. Definitely not just once, but I think we're going to look to do something that's at least minimally that, if not more than that, because there's no little, too little. We need to do more than just a little, for sure.
Exactly, because I know when there's out of all the times I've worked on music videos and commercial sets, from what I've been doing so far in my local area, safety has been top priority. And my guys that I end up having come onto set with me, they get so annoyed at me when it's like, look, if we're gonna be doing this, we got to pay attention to this, this, and this. But it's like, y'all get annoyed with me all y'all want. I want to make sure that everybody goes home at the end of the day with all their fingers and toes, because there's so many trip hazards, there's so many fall hazards, there's so many things falling on people hazards. It's, even on small sets, that it needs to be discussed every time, and that safety is super big.
Definitely, like, don't be afraid to voice safety concerns like through the chain of command. Like if you're on set and something doesn't feel right, talk to the ADs, because they need to know about it. If they know about it and it's unsafe, don't be afraid to leave, because it's better that you go home than what happened in New Mexico happened. Like, make the set aware that there's a problem, make the people in charge know that there's a problem, and then hopefully once you get into the union, let the union know that there was a problem. Like, go through the appropriate steps, and definitely watch out for yourself and the rest of your crewmates, because I think that will go a long way to making the whole industry safer.
I'd like to add to the Charles really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So something that you mentioned brought to memory of what we do as well when we do our training exercises. And even our training exercises, we use plastic or rubber guns. But when it comes to safety and during those training events, it's, if anybody sees any kind of safety issue at all, we have procedures in places like, hey, in our case, it's raise our non-firing hand and say safety timeout. And then the only person that can release us from that safety timeout is the actual person in charge of the drill, which is 9 times out of 10, if it's a safety issue, it's going to be the commanding officer of the entire installation. So it might be plausible to do something similar to that. So that way, let's say somebody does see a safety issue, they tell the ADs and they're like, whatever, and they just blow it off. Sit there and be like, no, we're going to stop the whole production and let the director be the one that releases everybody back into production. And but at least that way, the whole production stops, the safety issue gets addressed. And if it's something that can be proceeded without it being an actual safety issue, great. Otherwise, take care of it right then and there, and then have the director give the release to continue filming.
It would not be the director, it'd be the producer.
Shauna, there was you had a question about unions.
Yeah, so how many union workers are typically on set? Because with the thing in New Mexico, I heard that most of the staff was union workers, and when the strike went on, half of them or most of them left, and that's why they kind of pulled people off the street, and possibly that's why this accident happened.
I didn't hear anything about that. Did anybody else hear anything about that?
Yeah, it was an understaffed crew, which was part of the problem. But I think to answer your question directly, it depends on the state that you're shooting in. Some states are a lot harder to have non-union crew working with union crew. Like, it just doesn't happen in New York or LA. But in states that are more loose with the union regulations, like Florida and New Mexico, it's a little bit less cut and dry.
It's usually based on availability too, because like in New York and in LA, you're probably less likely to run out of union people. Whereas if you're shooting in Massachusetts and there's a bunch of productions happening, you might have a production going on and the union people aren't available, in which case you're allowed to hire non-union people.
Okay. Yeah. That was my next question, is like, what happens if, all of a sudden you're in the middle of production and all the union members have to leave for this strike or whatever, and what do you do?
That's not what if.
Your crew's gone.
when that happens.
Mhm.
When it happens, what do you do? Like, do we
You
just
hope that Gerald is on your movie and his cell phone is full of friends that he can get to come to set.
got it? Okay. Because it's just something that I heard, and that's kind of reason why I reached out to
Mhm.
you guys, the instructors, is
Mhm.
because it's like, what happens, because I know a lot of sets have either 50% or more or less of union workers, and it gets scary, because if you do have union workers who are your stunt crew, your special effects, and they leave, what do you do?
Well,
Not
if
have
it-
anything?
yeah, if it's a safety concern, I think that the number one thing that we're talking about here is if you're having people having to leave because of a strike or something, or you have certain personnel that are not available. I think that if you feel like there's anything that is making it less safe, or it's just dangerous for people on the set, or it's not a good working condition, then I think if you don't have what you need to do it in a way that is safe. Some people think about it like, well, can I still get the movie made? Can I get the shots? Can I get my scenes in? That's a different question than, should I shut my production down right now? And I think that sometimes you should shut your production down if there is a safety concern that you're not able to have a legitimate fix for. If you don't have the personnel for it, then you shouldn't do it.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Shauna, to answer your question, each state has their own requirements. If, like Charles says, if it's a right to work state, like New Mexico, Arizona, everything else except for LA and New York, those areas, okay, California, they can hire what they need to hire. Now, if it is a union shoot, then the union is going to require X amount of people in certain positions that have to be union. What happened out there in New Mexico on Rust was an anomaly, okay? So all the union people walked off because of the strike, and therefore the production could not find any more union people because they were also on strike. So there was nobody available. Now the problem here is that production still wanted to go ahead with the shoot. I'm not sure if you know this, but after she was sent to the hospital, 2 hours later, they started shooting again. If you didn't know that. And that is becoming another issue that they're bringing up with them, is because they didn't even recognize what happened on set, and they decided that they still should keep finishing the movie, which we consider in the professional world lack of respect.
Mhm.
So the union has nothing to do with that fact there, but each state and each union will require X amount of people. And typically it's more on the higher end, and obviously if it's a union shoot, so say it's for IATSE, for example, and we're talking grips and electrics, all of them have to be union, period. When you're talking about ADs, they also have to be all union. But when you're talking about other things that on set, like say wardrobe or makeup, or they could be, the first department heads can be union and everybody else can be non-union. When you talk about PAs, it's always non-union because it's hard to get union PAs.
You wind up with this weird thing where you're trying to get a tax break in New Mexico, so you have to hire a certain amount of people that live in New Mexico because that's what the law says. So you bring in your professionals from New York or LA or Chicago or Toronto or whatever, and then you have to fill in with the other positions that are
Which are not usually non-union
from the area. And sometimes, like in this case, it's an armorer who doesn't have the history and the credentials to have the position that she had. And so that's where you wind up with a really unfortunate situation of just not having the right person in place to go through the safety protocols.
So we're getting close to 3 o'clock here, and certainly this is an ongoing conversation. It's not just like, oh, we get together, we talk, and all is well, and we move on. So I definitely appreciate us all getting together and having this conversation. I think that if anybody has lingering questions, follow-ups, other information that they want to provide, then please just get that, send it directly to me or your instructor. And, I like hearing suggestions from you all about things that we should consider doing. We do have the props weapons packet. When someone does put it into a script, they have paperwork that they got to fill out. That's another step in the process of safety, but I think that we need to add to that document. And I think we need to include this PDF as part of it. And but we're going to do more. We're going to look for ways to be able to do more and make sure that everybody is educated. And there are reviews of that safety protocol throughout the program for sure. So
we need to add an assignment
yeah.
to the After Effects class where TL teaches people how to do muzzle flashes.
Yeah, without using
Right.
this, then they'll need to use they'll have to use.
Well, you could just make it come off of fingers and stuff.
Oh, that's true. That's very smart. Yes, the finger gun. Yeah. So anyway, but I appreciate everybody's time. I definitely appreciate the instructors being here and participating in this conversation. You guys are the professionals that have the experience. So you weighing in on this conversation is very, very important. So thank you for your time, students. Thank you so much for showing up and being a part of this discussion. People like you who show up to these kinds of meetings, you guys are like the leaders in our online world. So it's important for you to have these conversations because then in your courses and discussion boards, you can continue to further the conversation. So I appreciate your time as well. So thank you, everyone.
Well,
Okay, have a good rest of your day.
Will this recording be watchable again?
Yes, yeah, it will be. It's going to go up. Jenna, where are we going to put it?
I'll put it on the DF events site and I'll put it on YouTube right now and send a link in Discord and Facebook soon.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day, y'all.